come in. The door is not locked. Come on in. I've been expecting you. Sit down. I'm happy that you found your way to my studio. We're just getting ready to broadcast another episode of Short Story Theatre. I've heard that you've made a wager or two on some horses at Suffolk Downs, in Boston, and at Saratoga, in upstate New York. I've also been told that you are a regular player of the lottery. Today's story will interest you. It's based on real people and real events in Massachusetts back in the 1960s and 70s. Let's listen now to $10 on the Nose. Here to tell the tale is Bill Russo, who also wrote the story.
In the 1970s, gambling in the state of Massachusetts was taken out of the hands of hard-working citizens called bookies, and put into the greedy, sticky mitts of the politicians, in the form of a state lottery. I always felt that somehow an honest crook like my local numbers guy was more on the up and up than the people running the legal numbers racket. Now we are some 2 decades into the 21st century, and I am more certain than ever that I was right. Here then, with a full measure of cynicism, is my tale of old-school gambling, entitled $10 on the Nose. Many years ago, before the Massachusetts State Lottery transformed gambling from a shady activity conducted in the back rooms of stores on Main Street, to a shady activity conducted in the front rooms of stores on Main Street, the only way to gamble in Cape Cod was to contact a man called the Colonel. The Colonel had no office of his own in Hyannis, the capital city of Cape Cod, but he occupied every building on Main Street at one time or another during the course of the business day. A full-service purveyor of wagering, he would take a bet on a horse, a dog, or the last 4 numbers of the Treasury balance, which were printed daily in the Cape Cod Times. Writing down the wagers on little white slips of paper, the Colonel had only one rule: the minimum bet had to be $1. If a person bet $1 on the Treasury balance and had the winning numbers, he or she would win an even $500, with no taxes taken out. Few people knew his real name. He did not acquire the rank of colonel in military service, nor was the title picked up as some sort of a non-monetary honorarium. The man was so named because of his inordinate fondness for fried chicken. Every day, 7 days a week for lunch and dinner, he strolled to the KFC restaurant and summoned a flock of chicken, original recipe, with biscuits and gravy. On sunny summer days the Colonel often asked for takeout, and ate his chicken while sitting on a bench by the Main Street merry-go-round and penny arcade, near the present-day site of the President John F. Kennedy Museum. Passers-by would stop and chat for a few minutes. Before they left, the Colonel could be seen writing something on a small white slip of paper. Money changed hands. On occasion a uniformed person would encounter the Colonel on the street or in a store. As often as not, money would change hands and something would be written on a tiny square of paper. The Colonel was a very popular, if untidy figure in Cape Cod's largest community. A best-selling song of the era was not written for him, but the tune, Mr. 5x5, did describe him. He wasn't much over 5 feet tall, and he wasn't much less than 5 feet wide. Further, the long distances that he walked on his daily beat tended to make him perspire, and if awards were given for diaphoresis, sweating, the Colonel would have taken first, second and third places. At this point, it must be stressed again, if this narrative is to make proper sense, that the Colonel was a man liked and trusted by the entire city, in fact by virtually every adult man and woman on the whole of Cape Cod. People came from as far east as Provincetown and as far west as the Cape Cod Canal, to do business with him. His opinions on horse races, politics, wine, and whiskey were highly prized. He never flinched when he had to pay off on bets, and he shelled out the first thing in the morning, right after breakfast. He was on a first-name basis with every occupant of every cell in the Barnstable House of Correction, along with their jailers, their lawyers and even the judges who put them away. Selectmen, state representatives and police chiefs called him friend. Some people say that even a certain president of the United States was a pal and a customer of the Colonel's. It has been stated that the Colonel was called the Colonel because of his love of fried chicken which he ate at noon and night. But in the early morning hours, at breakfast, the Colonel was a ham and egger. Daily, by 8 in the morning, he smothered one of the stools at the counter of the Sunrise Cafe, where he polished off a platter of eggs, ham, fried potatoes and toast, with a bowl of baked beans on the side, a full pot of coffee, and 2 or 3 jelly donuts. The Sunrise Cafe was host to a group of regulars that included working people, folks who were not allowed to cook in their rented rooms, and single people like the Colonel who didn't want to prepare his own food. One of the more recent regulars was a police officer named Charlie Larson. He was relatively new to the Hyannis force and had a reputation as a mean cop. Larson watched the Colonel ravage his plate and leave it emptier than a fire station after a 5-alarm call. For reasons Officer Larson himself probably did not know, he took a dislike to the Colonel. After finishing his meal, the Colonel quickly filled out a few betting slips for some of his fellow diners, collected the money and set out on his rounds. Larson, who was on duty, followed close behind. All morning long the policeman dogged the rotund Colonel. In the afternoon, when the Colonel stopped in at the 5-cent to $1 department store to service a large group of customers, he noticed that he was still being shadowed by Larson. From the store, the Colonel crossed Main Street and headed for the docks, his shirt pocket now stuffed with a small pile of white betting slips, and a larger stack of green paper money. Winded from the walk, and sweating from the summer sun, the Colonel sat on a bench overlooking busy Hyannis Harbor. He watched as one of the hulking ferries departed for Nantucket Island, with hundreds of passengers and dozens of cars aboard.
"Colonel, you are under arrest. Put your hands up. Put your hands up now."
The Colonel stared in disbelief at Officer Larson who was barking at him.
"You're crazy, Charlie. Go chase a bank robber or something, and leave me alone."
"I'm serious, Colonel. Remove all your betting slips and place them on the ground in front of you. Then stand up and turn around. I'm gonna handcuff you and take you to jail for running an illegal bookmaking operation."
Moving faster than a sideshow magician, the Colonel drew out his wad of betting slips, and swallowed the whole pile before the astonished police officer could move 2 steps.
"I don't think you can arrest me, Charlie. You don't have any evidence."
The Colonel forced down the last of the betting slips and smiled as the exasperated Officer Larson stormed off towards the police station. But just then the Colonel started feeling a little queasy, and he decided to go home. The next morning at the Sunrise Cafe, the Colonel said no thank you to his customary feast of ham and eggs and a bunch of sides, and made do with coffee only. The other regulars in the cafe were concerned. Everybody's favorite waitress Sue was especially worried. For years she'd been dishing up the Colonel's meals and this was the first time he refused food. She walked up to the Colonel and spoke to him.
"What's wrong, Colonel? Why aren't you eating?"
"I couldn't hold the food down, Sue. I have a bad case of indigestion today, thanks to Officer Larson."
Everyone in the restaurant felt sorrow for the Colonel and anger at Larson. Then the regulars noticed that the officer wasn't in the cafe. He always ate his breakfast there before going on duty. They wondered where he was. Bobby Sproul, a young police officer who had been on the force for only 2 months, spoke up.
"The chief called me at home last night and told me that I've been moved up to days, starting today. I hated that midnight shift. I'm taking Larson's place. I guess something must have happened to him."
Just then, the bell attached to the front door of the Sunrise Cafe jangled loudly, announcing the arrival of a new customer. It was the Hyannis Police Chief, Howard D. Piano. He took a vacant seat at the counter, next to the Colonel.
"Good morning, Colonel. I'm sorry about your upset stomach, but I've got some news that might make you feel a little better. Officer Larson has been transferred to desk duty. Seems like he had paper on his mind so much, that I decided to give him nothing but paperwork to do, for his whole shift, every shift, from now on. Well, I have to get back to the station. I will see you later." As he left the cafe, the chief slid a folded piece of paper under the Colonel's coffee cup. Smiling broadly at the turn of events, a few moments later the Colonel opened the paper and saw a $10 bill with a handwritten note. The note said, "Please put this $10 on the nose of Paper Chase in today's 5th race at Suffolk Downs. I've got a hunch Paper Chase will be a winner."
And so closes, $10 on the nose. The Colonel had a long and successful career, right up until the time the government took over the numbers racket. But don't feel bad for him. I heard that he got a job as a bingo caller at the Church of Friday Night Bingo. And he's never been happier, because during the break at bingo halftime, they give him a free serving of a flock of fried chicken, with gravy and mashed potatoes, corn on the side, a big cup of Dunkin', and 3 jelly donuts. Thanks for listening and please come back to Short Story Theater again real soon. Won't you?